to this computer. Okay. So my name is Ellen Morrison, and I'm in Danielle and Chris's Thursday 8 a.m. tutorial. The school that I did my professional experience at was an all-girls high school in Toowoomba. The ages ranged from year 7 to year 12, and there was approximately 500 students that attended this school. Obviously, I taught in multiple different classrooms, but for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to focus on the assessment for learning strategies that I implemented in my Year 8 English class. So this was a class of approximately 25 mixed ability students, all females, obviously, and they all had access to their own Apple MacBooks, which is very cool. So I used 2 content descriptors to shape my learning intentions. So these were explore the ways that ideas and viewpoints in literary texts drawn from different historical, social, and cultural contexts may reflect or challenge the values of individuals and groups. And the other one that I used was create literary texts that draw upon text structures and language features of other texts for particular purposes and effects. I just thought that both these learning intentions were content descriptors were really important in creating my own learning intention. So that's why I chose to use both. So the learning intention was to create a short story that explores what happens to one of the characters in the story in the novel Bridge to Terabithia. And this gap needed to showcase the character's attitudes, values, beliefs, and personality. So the students read this book over the holidays, and then they had approximately 2 or 3 lessons where they just discussed briefly what had occurred in the novel. So when I went in, I wanted to implement some diagnostic assessment in order to gauge where the students were at and what sort of level of understanding they had of the characters. So I gave students 2 copies of these graphic organizers that you can see just here. And then I asked them to complete them, take about 10 minutes, one for Jess and one for Leslie, the 2 main characters, just describing the characters essentially. So then once they had finished them, I gave them to these on the computer. Gave these to them on the computer. Then I asked the students to email me their 2 completed graphic organizers. And after the lesson, I reviewed all the student responses. And I did this because I wanted to identify the students' needs in regards to developing their understanding of these main characters. And so that I could accurately plan and implement learning experiences that would help fulfill these needs and fulfill these gaps in knowledge. What I was specifically looking for when I was reviewing the diagnostic assessment was, were they able to accurately describe characters' core values, beliefs, attitudes, and personality? Were they able to correctly interpret the author's portrayal of these 2 main characters? And were they able to provide me with enough information? Were they able to fill all 10 boxes? I also noted down any misconceptions that I thought would be important for me to go back later and revise. So one that I've got in Student 13's example just here is bossy. And so the character of Leslie she's quite a strong character, and she is very comfortable in herself, but she's definitely not been portrayed to be bossy. That's just obviously something that one of the students has picked up incorrectly. Okay, so then I needed to use this diagnostic assessment and analyze it and create a bit of a plan for myself. So in order to track the progression of the students throughout the learning period, I used this spreadsheet, and what you can see here is I've created different categories. So for how well students were able to accurately describe their characters' values, beliefs, attitudes, personality, how they were able to accurately represent the character, and if they were able to give me enough information. So you can just see there, so for student 13, whose work we showed before, I've only given them a 1 for provide adequate detail and descriptive details, because they only gave me, I think, about 5 or 6 examples, and from a 150-page book where Leslie is one of the main characters, she should be able to come up with more examples than that. And I gave her a 1 for the accurate portrayal, just because of that issue that we talked about with the bossiness, or the bossy comment. She did a really good job at pointing out Leslie's personality and her attitude. So that she, is very imaginative, she is very smart, but for her values and beliefs, I only gave her a 1 because she doesn't really delve into that much in this graphic organizer, even though we are just looking for an overview. We do see a bit of evidence that she, cares about her friends. That's one of her core values, but there's not a lot of depth. As you can see, most students were able to find enough examples to fill in all 10 boxes. There was a few who only got about half, and there were some that only got 1 or 2, or didn't do it at all. And so I gave them 0s. Also, characters' personalities, that was quite well done throughout the novel. But as you can see here, there's a lot of 1s for students correctly interpreting the author's portrayal of Jess and Leslie. Okay, so feed up was something that I really wanted to work on in this PECS. I consistently provided the students with this feed up so that they could have an indication of what the lesson was going to look like. So I gave them every lesson I would write on the whiteboard, the learning goal, and then the success criteria. So I've just got one example of what I would typically write on a board in a day, just below there. Okay, so my formative assessment strategy number 1. So as it appeared from my diagnostic assessment, it seemed that students had an understanding of these characters, but it wasn't in depth. So I wanted the students to be able to understand the motivations of these characters' actions. So I decided to implement some questioning and some discussion-based work to help students to gain an understanding of these characters. This would also help me to gain an understanding of how students' learning was progressing as we progress through the unit. And also through discussion, we could get rid of any misconceptions that students might have. So I posed a lot of questions that were designed to stimulate thought and conversation. And this also helped to develop their understanding of key themes within the novel. None of these questions either, they weren't yes or no answers. They all required students to engage in that higher order thinking and to engage their knowledge utilization skills. Okay, so this is just one example of, when we were doing questioning and discussions, we did this quite a bit, and I got students to respond to these questions in numerous ways. So we had individual written responses, which I've just got an example there of student 13, and those were the questions just below of this response. I won't go through it all. And we also did a lot of individual written responses like that, also good at developing literacy skills, a lot of think, pair, share activities, small group discussions, spectrum or barometer activities I really liked doing, so giving students sort of like 2 juxtaposed ideas. So do you think that Jess should have ditched Leslie, yes or no? But then it wasn't just yes or no, it was why. So again, really making students justify their answers made them have to think more about this character's motivations. And then we also did a whole lot of class discussions, which I really enjoyed. So, and then when I was giving feedback, this was mainly verbal feedback, and it came from either myself or other students. We did do a lot of peer feedback, which I really enjoyed. And it was, again, focused on the task and not on the student themselves. So it's all about how the student can develop. It's not what's wrong or right with them. It's how they can develop their skills. So this feedback was seen through, I often made general comments to them every now and again when I was checking their homework questions. So they'd be working on other tasks. I would have a read and I'd go, oh, I really like the way that you've shown Leslie valuing friendship. Next time, maybe try and explain a bit more about why that's important to her. And then we also did a lot of feedback through those class discussions. So when students were asked to share their answers with the class, students often agreed and added onto that, or they disagreed and they had to explain why they disagreed. And then also when feedback was given, I found it my biggest goal when giving feedback not to say what they didn't do well, but to more say what they can do better for next time. So really focusing on that feed forward. So how can they improve their practice? Okay, so at the end with formative assessment data collection, for more abstract topics like questioning and discussions, I found it a bit difficult to accurately track that data because it is so, there's a lot of content, and it was a bit difficult for me, but I tried to implement this tracking based on class engagement. So what you can see I've done here, I've sort of ticked yes or no for how they engaged with assessment activities, formative assessment activities. So yes, they did it, no, they didn't. And then if there was, if I was reading their work and I noticed something that was a bit off, I just made sure to put a little like check in or check understanding, so I would know to go back and just keep an eye on that student and potentially provide them with some more guidance or some more modeling. Okay, so then I implemented this action strategy. So this is my next formative assessment strategy, and I really wanted to get the students to empathize with the main characters so that they could, again, get a better understanding of their motives, values, personality, everything to do with that character. So I asked students to create a duologue in pairs and about what they believe the conversation would have looked like if Jess had told Leslie that he was too afraid to go to Terabithia. So I've just got, again, student 13's example here, and that's with her partner as well. And so what I was looking for there, I wanted the students to be truthfully depicting the characters, demonstrate an understanding of their personalities and their values. And I also wanted the dialogue, and this was specifically set out to students, that it needed to be able to fit within the original text. So it couldn't have Jess die, because that wouldn't be able to fit, the rest of the story wouldn't be able to continue. So that was interesting to see how students made that happen. So feedback that we gave on that, came all essentially from peer feedback. So students nominated themselves to perform their duologue in class, which is great. I wish I had some videos of that, but the school wasn't very comfortable with having me record the students, which is fine. But so to record this feedback, I just wrote down some notes of what students said in the class discussions. So all the feedback was very respectful. I was really proud of the girls for the way that they were able to generate those very adult conversations almost. And so first I asked them to describe what they really liked about the performance that they had just seen. These performances only went for 30 seconds to a minute, so they were very short. And so I've just got some examples down the side there. So student 13's is just the second from the bottom. And so it was like, I liked how nice and supportive Leslie was of Jess, but how she still made some cheeky comments. And that was really good because that's showing a lot of Leslie's character, which is exactly what I was looking for. And then I also asked the students what they would like the pair to improve for next time. So an improvement was that there could have been more talking from Jess, and that we didn't get to see a lot of his personality. So showing a bit more of his personality next time. Okay, so finally, the final formative assessment that I implemented was students having to write 100 to 200 words of a short story using a character from the novel and a setting from the novel that I gave them. So I really wanted to implement this form of formative assessment because it really relates back to that learning goal, which actually the summative assessment requires them to do essentially this, but just more complex, longer, more word count. So I really wanted to give students the opportunity to practice these skills. So they started off with a template where they planned out their story and planned how they would represent their character. And so I've just got student 13's first copy that she gave to me there. So then after that, I really thought this was a great opportunity for me to be able to give some really in-depth and individual feedback to the students. Again, this is also that they can improve their practice. So if you read, so my comments are in the blue that I gave, and I was giving comments on what I really liked that they had done and not what I didn't like, what could be improved for next time. So giving that feed forward, not making it about what they didn't do well this time, making it about what they could do even better next time. That was the main focus for me. I also used LOR and Corno's feedback technique that we discussed in class, and I really liked that. So giving students a general comment rather than picking out little mistakes all through it, because I feel like when you give students those, they just fix those mistakes and the comments like, oh, okay, that doesn't matter as much. But I feel like, well, when you see the results of this feedback, then you'll be able to see how it was implemented. And I think she did a really good job at taking on my feedback and using it to improve her writing. So this is just an example. I'm not going to go through it all, but if you want to do that later. So how the student used my feedback and my feed forward to develop her story. She really took on my advice. So some of my advice was to explain why Janice did the things that she did, and she did that really well. Like, I'm very impressed. I would really love to see her summative assessment because I think she's going to do very well. Finally, okay, so my evidence of impact. So obviously we've got our diagnostic assessment that we looked at in the first half of the first part of the video. And then I did this as a final formative assessment tracking strategy. So rather than it just being about me and what I thought, I wanted to get the students' understanding of how they felt they had progressed throughout the semester. Oh, not the semester, 4 weeks. And so I got them to do, so fill out the same boxes of describing the character's core values, beliefs, attitudes, how they felt they were able to do that. And then I got them to do all that. And then I went through and I decided what I thought. And I actually did that separately, and then I put them together so that my view wasn't influenced by them and their view wasn't influenced by me. But yeah, as you can see, such an improvement there. Obviously, there's still some things that aren't perfect, but that could have been maybe improved if I had stayed a bit longer. But yeah, most of them nailing that, providing accurate descriptive details. So like fitting within the word count. Also, something that was a really good change, being able to describe the characters and interpret the way that the author wanted them to be portrayed, if that makes sense. So you can see a lot of ones in the diagnostic assessment category, but then when we move over to this correctly interpreting the author's portrayal of the character over here, there's still some ones, but way more twos, which is awesome. And yeah, so just in general, great improvement there, which I was really happy to see. Okay, and then I've already shown you all these. These are just examples of, just to show the level of advancement or the progression level of the students' work throughout the 4 weeks. So starting off with this very basic graphic organizer of essentially how they were describing one character from the book. And these aren't all about the same character. There's different characters, but we weren't concerned with one character. We were concerned with multiple characters in the book. So then going on to questions, this duologue, their first draft, and then their final copy. So it's really nice just to see that all laid out and how that progresses throughout the term. And I think that would be something really nice to show the students as well. Like, look at how, yes, it seems daunting at first having to write that massive paragraph, but look at how we just slowly do it over the term. Okay, so for my future pecs, I really want to get the students to fill out that mastery sheet at the start of the semester and then at several checkpoints throughout. So rather than just having them do it at the end, which then I didn't really get how their confidence had grown, I just saw how confident they were at that point. But yeah, I think if I implemented it throughout the term, that would be really good to show them how they have improved, how they have perceived that they have improved, and how they actually have improved, which would be, I think, really beneficial. I also want to educate myself further on data collection and how I can use this information further to guide my planning and my practice, just to really make that information valuable, because I don't think that I utilized it enough. I think I could definitely improve upon that. I want to implement more peer feedback. I think peer feedback was a little bit scary for me at first. I was afraid that they might be very harsh on one another, but they came at it with different perspectives that I didn't see it with. And I think that they have their own sort of peer language that they communicate through. So I think they were able to explain things at times better than I was able to explain it to them. That was really cool to see. I definitely want to implement more feed up, and also different ways to communicate it, because I feel just writing it on the board every day, students began to disengage with that. So I think that's definitely going to be one of my goals for next semester, to research that and research how to make it more engaging for the students. And then finally, to be able to stay longer, I would have loved to have been able to see the students' summative assessment pieces, just because I just think it would have been so satisfying to see them go from the start, that graphic organized at the start, to what their final copy. I think that would have been really satisfying. So, I mean, it is the prerogative of a prac student to not be able to stay for the whole term, but yeah, that would have been one of the things that I would definitely like to do, probably when I'm a teacher, more or less than on PECs. Okay, thank you. That's my reference list.